Hello, and welcome back To Lead is to Learn, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of leadership together. Whether you're a returning listener or joining us for the first time, I'm truly grateful you've chosen us as your companion upon your leadership development journey. Our mission here is simple: to empower you with the knowledge, skills, and insights needed to excel in leadership. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to welcome each of you, whether this is your first time or you're a regular listener. Each of you are a valued member of our community. Your trust in us is invaluable, and it's a privilege to contribute towards your growth. Speaking of growth, did you know that To Lead is to Learn is brought to you by Lambda Solutions? At Lambda, we specialize in leadership development and coaching, dedicated to empowering individuals like you to become the best leaders possible. If you're ready to elevate your leadership skills, or if your organization is seeking guidance to achieve its leadership goals, I encourage you to explore the Lambda way by visiting our website at www.thelambda.co.uk to learn more about how we can directly assist you. Thank you for being part of our community. Together, let's continue learning and growing. And remember, following and sharing our podcast can help us grow our community and impact even more leaders. In today's special episode, I'm going to be answering some listener questions and sharing some of my own lessons and insights. Wow, this is a big one. I truly believe that those who grow together succeed together. If we show up stressed as a leader, we cultivate stress. I lived in constant fear of being found out and caught out. I would not be here right now doing this without his mentorship. The reaction to change is very much the same as the period of grief. Well, they're going to remain in the denial stage for a very long time, and there's nothing we or anyone else can do to change that. They will appreciate the honesty more than the uncertainty. All I had been doing was self-management and ultimately self-promotion. This is not leadership, this is management. I am on a mission to get this out there. We cannot lead if we are not open to learning. That is not inspiring. That is not compelling. That is just lip service. So, without further ado, let's dive in. In this first section, we have some questions about my leadership story. The first is, what inspired you to pursue a career in leadership, and how has your approach to leadership evolved over time? So, in all honesty, it was ambition and ego. I actually interviewed for a teaching job when I was 23 and was asked by the head of department at the time where I saw myself in 5 years' time. And I replied with, "In your job." Surprisingly, I actually got the job, and less than 3 years later, the head of department was retiring. And without his job being advertised, I actually went to the head teacher at the time with a presentation already made on how I could do the job and what I envisioned achieving and putting in place. This really impressed them, enough to actually internally promote me without even advertising the role in the first place. That's kind of an example of where my ego led me. In terms of my leadership approach, I never had any formal leadership training at all. So my informal training early on was just from observing and mimicking those around me. And in that environment, I was actually surrounded by very proud leaders. By that I mean people who were very much hands-on and in a way almost controlling and autocratic. They almost represented the old school fall on your own sword approach. This being the don't ask others to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself, so hell, you might as well actually do it yourself kind of leader. But also, they were very strong characters. They never showed any weakness. They would never show that they're struggling. It's just a get it done despite everything else kind of approach. And this really impacted me early on in my career, as these were the role models which I had to aspire to. And I really struggled to meet my own perceptions of this and felt I often fell short of it. Despite externally getting everything done, I in reality never led anyone. I resourced others. I gave them everything they needed in terms of I literally handed it over. I uploaded onto our online system. But from then on, it was very much a laissez-faire leadership approach. I had expectations, but I never really enforced them. or even shared them in some respects. I just internally wanted those who were meant to be following me to just do what I expected, and I just made sure I met them so that I looked like I was the best, which again is my ego ruling me at the time. I wanted to be seen to be in control, to be in charge, and in full transparency, I honestly wanted to impress those in higher positions. This 100% was due to my upbringing. A lot is made of millennials being brought up to become people pleasers and expecting the world to sit and take notice of them. I mean, I lost my father when I was 14, and I'd always been seeking his recognition and approval throughout my entire childhood. And when he passed away, that need for recognition passed on to my mother, yet was never truly satisfied, as in reality, I needed the approval from my father. And as such, I am well aware that in my life and in my professional career, I have been constantly seeking recognition from parental figures, wanting to be recognised for my efforts, for my achievements, whatever they were, and to be told I was good at what I was doing. I wanted to be fast-tracked up the ladder and felt I had earned the right to have a seat at the table from my achievements. The key issue here being they were my achievements and I was seeing them as my achievements. I was 100% focused on me and my recognition and my achievements. But upon reflection right now, I can definitely say I would have been a horrible leader to work under. But there were definitely a few moments which impacted me personally and professionally, which hugely impacted my leadership approach, and I'm sure I'll share them in a bit. The second question is, can you share a pivotal leadership lesson that has significantly influenced your leadership style? So in a way, this is going to be a threefold answer, as there was a sequence of events which occurred which brought to the forefront my leadership approach and exploded my own self-awareness. And it all started with the pandemic and the COVID lockdown. Suddenly, being thrown into an environment where I was separated and isolated from my team, having to still maintain a high level of personal performance and check in virtually with the other members of my team. We, like a lot of people, started using Microsoft Teams. Other platforms obviously are available. Through this, we were able to have check-in calls as well as see the activities of others in our team. And suddenly, despite the isolation and distance from my team, it was there, in front of my eyes, just how dedicated and incredibly capable and exceptional my team actually was. There was one colleague that I had worked closely with for several years in particular, who I had taken for granted, and I guess in a way, if I'm completely honest, I think I felt threatened by. And this colleague became someone who I was constantly in direct communication with via WhatsApp during the pandemic, and they kind of became an ear for some of my decisions, and I felt became a bit of a cheerleader and kind of comrade within this strange working environment we had. I remember after a couple of months of the lockdown, I actually sat and I spent some time writing a long WhatsApp message to them and reached out to clear the air with them, going back over the past and sharing how I was well aware that I had taken them for granted and had not seen their worth, but that I had come to see how very much I valued their work, their support, and the unwavering commitment that they showed. And we actually went on to have a much stronger working relationship since I sent that message. So the second event was only a couple of months later after that, at a barbecue which I hosted that summer when the restrictions were lifted for the first time. And during this event, another friend of mine who had previously worked as a professional coach was standing with me in the kitchen as we discussed my newfound awareness of my leadership. And he challenged me to find some objects in the kitchen which represented each member of my team, then to place them on the side in a way that represented the dynamics of the team. Then once I'd done this, he asked me to explain why I had made the decisions that I had. This simple task just blew my mind. Suddenly I had been made to think about the others in my team in a new way, and then what impact and influence I could have over them by simply knowing and reflecting on the dynamics of the team and where I wanted them to be as their leader. And the third event came about a year later after that, when with the same friend I was on a walk and we were discussing the leadership lessons I had gone through that year by simply taking time to reflect and move my focus from inwards to outwards facing. Our discussion led to the realization that so-called leadership training, which we had seen in our setting, was very focused on management and getting tasks completed. Yes, this had been what I had been emulating for my entire career up until this point. This had led me to become very removed from my team and focused on productivity, whereas it had suddenly dawned on me that leadership was really about relationships and about others. How we could work with these people and for these people to ensure that they could become the best versions of themselves in order to be successful and productive as a team. From this single discussion, I then went away and I developed a leadership development program which not only revolutionized my leadership, but impacted others and has actually since led to not only this podcast, but also Lambda solutions being developed as well. The third question is, what are the key qualities you look for when hiring or promoting individuals into leadership roles? So for me, leadership roles require two qualities to be present within an individual, and that is it. These two qualities are being personable and being growth orientated. By personable, what I mean is that they actively seek out others, they want to work with others and to help others. I don't mean sitting there on the job having a chat about anything but the job. Instead, they should be individuals which use their ability to connect with others to do great things. If they do things by themselves and for themselves, then they are not ready for leadership. And if I reflect upon myself, for example, I would have looked at my younger self and said exactly that. My ego was too self-centered for leadership at the time. Only during the pandemic did I suddenly see those around me. Only then did I do anything which resembled leadership and reach out to my colleague. Beforehand, all I had been doing was self-management and ultimately self-promotion. By growth orientated, what I mean is that they should be willing to reflect upon themselves, work on their faults and maximize their potential within their areas of strength. They should be looking to continuously learn and grow from everyone around them, as well as be looking to foster growth within others. The best leaders know they are never complete, they have never made it, and they are not the finished article, and that they will always have something to learn and develop. I mean, if I again reflect upon myself as an example, and that conversation in the kitchen with my friend who was coaching me at the time, in that moment I became a leader. Only from that moment on was I thinking about others, working with others, and looking to grow and develop both myself and others. I had spent 5 years with a title, but at no point had I exhibited leadership in any form. With these two qualities, an individual can become the greatest of leaders. All the management responsibilities which are required can be learned in the role, learned on the job, and learned very quickly from watching others. They each have processes and strategies which can be learned and developed from scratch. Too often people look for these things when promoting individuals, but you cannot force an individual who is not ready to A, see others and be personable, and B, want to grow and develop themselves and others. I truly believe this is what many people refer to as hearing the call to leadership. At some point in an individual's career, they may feel a desire to be part of something greater than themselves, at which point they will emerge and start to exhibit these two traits. This is emergent leadership, and it occurs naturally and at any level in an organization. The individual may not even realize it is them exhibiting leadership, but a real leader in an organization will be able to identify these individuals, see this talent, and be able to nurture it through promoting them and empowering them to utilize their calling, their call to leadership. The fourth question in this area is, how do you handle feedback, both positive and negative, and how do you encourage a culture of constructive feedback within your team? So this has actually changed throughout my career. If I refer to A as being before the call and B after the call, being the times before and after that moment in my kitchen with my friend, then before the call, I would say I 100% feared feedback. I dreaded it, as I took it as a personal attack on my character. So why was this? Well, it was kind of because I was guided and driven by my ego. I was inwards facing and self-centered. I only wanted to hear good things to feed my ego. I lived in constant fear of being found out and caught out. And as such, my imposter syndrome drove my anxiety, which was teetering on hearing a single slate against me. I therefore never sought out feedback. I never gave feedback. I simply existed like an ostrich with its head in the sand, or like a duck in water paddling, only worried about staying in the same place within this ever-moving current that was kind of the workplace. But after the call, I saw and recognized feedback as something new, as an opportunity. I actually said this to a friend of mine the other day, that in life, we actually have opportunities everywhere. It's just sometimes we convince ourselves that these are obstacles. Feedback, both good and bad, are opportunities to learn, progress, and develop. The moment you embrace development and growth, feedback becomes a superpower. It's a metric, a kind of measure of your rate of success, and guides your journey onwards. In this way, it really does become a kind of feed forward rather than a feedback. How to make feedback a constructive process in your team, that's actually an interesting one, as individually we all have preconceptions as to what feedback means. As such, I genuinely believe there is a great way of doing this without seeking out an individual to give them feedback. To me, the act of doing it that way has the energy direction all wrong and can put the person that you're giving feedback to on the back foot, and they kind of feel threatened. So even inviting them to come and receive feedback does kind of the same thing. So instead, it is about changing the dynamic and direction of energy flow in the process. So start instead by inviting them to give you feedback. Start with a question. What do you think about XYZ? Then get into a discussion about this, where you both agree on actions and ways to move forwards. Even if the other person has done something which isn't great, simply by being a leader, take some of the responsibility and share in the growth process. I truly believe that those who grow together succeed together. So the second set of questions is actually about my leadership approach. So the first one here is, what are some common misconceptions about leadership and how would you debunk them? So that's an interesting question. I actually have discussed a few in the previous answers, but for me, there are a couple of clear misconceptions which still persist. The first being that leadership involves getting things done. This is not leadership, this is management. Only when we clearly understand the two practices can we really understand our role as a leader. So I am on a mission to get this out there. Leadership is the why. Leadership is about working with individuals, sharing the why, and in doing so, show them the path to the impossible. It is about inspiring the why in others, which takes them to a place they have never thought they could reach on their own. Management is then the who, what, where, when, and how. Management is the strategic and logistical aspects behind the role. In a way, you can picture it as being on a ship and a captain holding and sharing the telescope with others on the ship in order to show them and allow them to see the beautiful desert island which holds all the treasure. And management is then having the knowledge to guide the team to open the sail, angle it in the right way in order to catch the wind and to take everyone there. Without sharing the why, the vision, the crew wouldn't have the motivation to work together to get there. That's the leadership. However, without the guidance and the overseeing of the tasks needed to get the boat to its destination, you would just end up going around in circles, never actually reaching this end goal, and developing a very frustrated and disgruntled crew. And that's the management. And you need both in order to actually be successful. You can't lead without management, and you can't manage without leadership. Both of them together is necessary to effectively lead an organisation. The second misconception I'd like to share is the misconception that leadership is for the boardroom. Too many organisations have leadership teams which are up there in the boardroom, and then they have middle management, which are there to organise and run the teams. This is perpetuating the issue of unmotivated and thankless workforces. This silent quitting pandemic that we currently have, the job dissatisfaction, the frustration of feeling like you're on a hamster wheel, this all comes from leadership being the boardroom level, where a vision is cast and shared, and then management being this middle band which translates and gets the vision done. This is completely wrong. Leadership doesn't even need a title. Leadership is simply the ability to influence others. And, as I said earlier, this comes down to being personable and having a growth mindset. There are 3-year-olds who demonstrate both of these traits, and yes, they are in fact exhibiting leadership qualities. Ultimately, if you watch, they are influencing their friends and helping them to do things they otherwise wouldn't have. So, it isn't just for the boardroom level. And organisations should look to provide leadership development training to colleagues at any level who are exhibiting these 2 simple traits. This is how you future-proof an organisation, ensure productivity, and ultimately reach new levels of success. The second question in this section is, what role does emotional intelligence play in effective leadership, and how do you cultivate it in yourself and your team? Well, the simple answer is it plays a massive role. Emotional intelligence encompasses 2 key strands for me. The first being the ability to recognize and to manage your own emotions, and then the second being the ability to recognize how your actions impact the emotions of others, and therefore control your actions. Notice here, the only thing we control is our actions. We do not control our emotions or the emotions of others. Too often we get stuck into trying to control our emotions. Think about it. We have a tough day at work and we start feeling stressed. Our mind starts racing, our palms get sweaty, we start feeling hot, our breathing shallows, and we feel our heart racing. All key signs of stress. Maybe we start getting a headache as a result of feeling exhausted and mentally drained. Maybe, as a result of all this, we start feeling hopeless, angry, sad, frightened, dread, we panic, all of which perpetuates the problem. We get stuck in trying to stop ourselves feeling this way. We start thinking irrationally, and it just never helps the situation. However, if we refocus our mind the next time, and instead we focus on actions, very quickly we will see a different result. When we start feeling this stress coming on, our shallow breathing, our heart rate racing, we get hot and clammy, rather than stewing in our thoughts and trying to control these internally and our emotions and our feelings, if we take small and simple actions, like we sit, we close our eyes, we puff out our chest, one of these power positions, we start to take 5 slow and deep breaths, holding our breath for a couple of seconds each time. If we do this, our mind focuses on the breathing, our body reacts to the breathing, it slows down as our breathing has slowed, our heart rate slows, and we start to calm ourselves. So by taking action, things that we physically can do to control our body, we are actually able to influence our emotions. So by controlling and focusing on action, we have managed our emotion. We haven't controlled them. The moment we accept that emotional responses are natural, they are welcome, and they're all valid, all emotional responses, but it instead is the actions we take in the heat of the emotions which demonstrates emotional awareness. We need to become aware of how we react to emotions and then work on the reactions, not the emotion itself. Now, as a leader, we actually have a greater responsibility than this. Our responsibility is to control our actions in order to help others to manage their emotions. For example, there's an upcoming stressor at work, which we all know will cause stress within our team and cause panic. We can get ahead of the curve by delivering this in a calm and measured way, which is supportive and shows genuine belief in your team. By being assured and reassuring, we are helping to manage the level of stress within the room and within our team. If we show up stressed as a leader, we cultivate stress. The way we as leaders show up is how our followers show up. We are what we see. So be a role model for your team. Show up in a way you wish they will show up. Be the team member you want to cultivate in others. If you want a calm team, we be calm. If we want them to be excited about something, we show excitement. If we show up in a particular way, they will reflect what we demonstrate. The third question in this section is, what strategies do you use to motivate and inspire your team, especially during times of change or uncertainty? This is an interesting question, as I did a mini-series of podcast episodes on the motivational leader in Series 1. Through this series, I realized myself that the psychological theories behind motivation themselves seem to point towards something crucial. And that was that we as leaders can't directly increase the intrinsic motivation of the members of our team. Instead, it seems that we can only really create an environment within which individuals themselves can become increasingly intrinsically motivated. Now, my key takeaways here were this. Number 1, get to know the strengths and weaknesses of your team and provide the right level of challenge to them. The challenge and reward of completing it will ultimately motivate them. The second is, by getting to know your team, learn their recognition language. How do they recognize you recognizing them? Do they need public displays of recognition, being congratulated in front of others? Do they need one-to-one time with you where you congratulate them for a job well done? Do they need a little note of thanks? Do they need rewards? Do they need the same recognition every single time? Are we going to get this right every single time? No. But we must learn from this, and we will therefore get it right more often than not. The third is provide the resources, the base financial reward, and opportunities to both succeed and grow. You as a leader are pretty much just in service of their growth and development. By being a leader and recognizing that your role is in service of them and that they are not being in service of you, you will start to develop the environment for them which motivates them. Inspiring individuals comes down to communication and follow-through. It is as simple as casting a compelling vision and having the follow-through to put your actions into action. You as a leader must cast the vision, own the vision, and live the vision. It is yours. It is shared, and together you move towards the vision. But if you are casting it and then doing nothing about it and expecting others to see it through, then that is not inspiring. That is not compelling. That is just lip service. The fourth one in this section is, how do you foster a culture of continuous learning and growth within your team? So this actually ties into the previous answer. It is really simple, and that is by empowering the individuals in my team to take risks, to get creative and to problem solve. By giving them the power to succeed and the security to fail. When we're in an environment where failure is safe and success is celebrated, that truly is inspiring and motivating. How can you not want to do your best in an environment like that? Think about a toddler learning to walk. When they pull themselves up using the sofa and stand for the first time, everyone celebrates with them. When they undoubtedly fall back down, nobody shouts at them or scorns them. So guess what? They try again. And they get better. And they want to do it more. As they are getting recognised and celebrated for their wins, and their failures are ignored. Failing is safe, so they are not put off by trying. We are all still that toddler, looking for that environment to learn in. The next question in this section is, how do you balance the need for innovation and risk-taking with the importance of stability and consistency in your leadership? For me, this comes down to how we define stability and consistency. For me, this is just how we show up. As long as we are consistent in the environment we create, the communication we give, and the resourcing we provide, then there will be an environment for innovation and risk-taking. When the members of our team know what to expect from us in each type of situation, there will be no fear factor within risk-taking ventures. If the members of our team feel empowered, then they know they can take decisions to be innovative and to try new approaches when it is appropriate. Therefore, our communication needs to be consistent around when our team members can take risks and when they can get innovative. There is one easy way for our team members to know when innovation and creative thinking is encouraged and when it may not be. That is the context of the problem. If we as a team have time and therefore a lack of urgency, then there is space for innovation. However, when there is a lack of time and therefore a necessity for urgency, then tried and tested methods are required rather than innovation. If we as leaders create an understanding of the context through our communication consistently, then members of our team will be empowered to know when to innovate, risk take, or to stick to the tried and tested. The last question in this section about leadership approaches is, what are your thoughts on mentorship in leadership, and how has mentorship impacted your own leadership journey? So I've actually had several mentors in my time since my call to leadership, be it my friend who introduced me to coaching and has been a mentor/coach at different times throughout my journey. At times he has coached me by challenging my thinking with deep questions, while at other times he has become a mentor to me and given me some feedback and some honest truths, which has developed me as an individual and a leader. In truth, I would not be here right now doing this without his mentorship. I've had other mentors along the way, less explicit in terms of officially being recognised as a mentor of mine. However, I have seen these as mentors, and through seeking them out, sitting down with them and asking them questions, I've learnt so much. Every single one of my discussions on this podcast, I treat as a mentorship opportunity. I ask the questions I not only believe you as listeners would want to hear the answers to, but equally, I ask the questions I want to know the answers to. I truly believe that if you take life this way, treat every conversation as an opportunity to learn, then you cannot fail to grow and develop. In terms of official mentorship in leadership, I believe this is crucial. However, it comes down to the relationship that there is. The mentor must be willing to inhabit two spaces for me. The first is the supporter, and the second is the challenger. Without both of these, then there is a key element of successful mentorship missing. If you don't have the supporter and all you have is the challenger, then that can put you as the mentee on the back foot and you might start feeling a bit insecure in your position. Whereas if all you have is the supporter, then you're not going to grow and develop as quick So therefore you need to have both the supporter and the challenger, and you need to oscillate between the two. The third section of questions is all about leadership challenges, and the first one in this section is, many leaders struggle with delegation. What strategies do you employ to effectively delegate tasks while maintaining control? Well, this is actually one of my biggest challenges which I face. This is still a hangover from my people-pleasing and the ever-present desire for recognition. I'm well aware of that. There is an element too of pride, and therefore it is a challenge for me to let go. However, something which I have learned along the way is so obvious, yet so hard to accept. This is that nobody will ever improve and get better at something without first being given the opportunity to try and either succeed or fail. As such, one strategy I actually employ is to list out the tasks which I need to get done. I rank them from 1 to 10 in terms of how much I enjoy doing them, and also give them a second rank in terms of how much they require my sole involvement. In other words, how much do they need me? When I do this, I actually find there will be some tasks which have a 7 for enjoyment but a 1 for needing me to do it. These tasks I look at and realise they will likely be a task which someone else will therefore get enjoyment from too. Those which have a 3 for enjoyment, for example, and an 8 for needing me, I see as simply being part of the job. That is my responsibility to get that done, even if I don't enjoy it. I give away all the ones which others would enjoy which don't need me. I keep all those I may not enjoy but need me, so I have these 2 little lists. And I also keep those which I will enjoy that actually also need me. So I don't just have ones that I won't enjoy. Then I look at my time, how much have I got left, and I consider the tasks which are like a 9 for enjoyment and a 5 for needing me, for example. So I really enjoy them, but they kind of need a little bit of me in the sense that they need something from me. For these tasks, if I have time, I might myself do them. While if I don't, I consider whether I could work with or collaborate with maybe someone else. So maybe work with them to train them to be able to do them in the future. So at some point, that needing me score might go down, and therefore it can easily get delegated. So I'm never leaving myself with stuff that I don't enjoy, but I am starting to delegate out some parts. These are things that don't necessarily need me, but they're really enjoyable, and things which they may need a bit of me, but I could train someone else to do, but they're kind of enjoyable. There are therefore tasks which I haven't mentioned, ones which maybe aren't enjoyable at all and they don't need me. Those ones I look at and I think, well, if they don't need me and they're not enjoyable, how necessary are they? And then, are they something which maybe if I've got a bit of time I fill in and I do them myself? Or are these things that maybe I can work with someone else and maybe start delegating them out with the knowledge that they may not be enjoyable, but I am empowering them by giving them some tasks. So I'm giving them something. I'm maybe setting it as a challenge, but I'm not just going to dump them all on one person and therefore they're doing this horrible workload of things which are not enjoyable and they didn't need me to be doing them. So therefore I just gave it to them, because otherwise that just looks like me dumping a bunch of work. So I try not to dump all this stuff on people. I might give a little bit to some people, but I keep them for myself to fill in those little dead times where, it's just an admin task. If I get it done quickly, then at least it gives me a little bit of a dopamine hit of I've got it done. The next question here is, how do you prioritize and manage your time effectively, especially when juggling multiple responsibilities and projects? So this is another great question, and again a real challenge. Time, for me, I see time as our most valuable resource, and as a leader, it is often pulled in multiple directions. For me, there are several types of time allocations we need to make as a leader. So these might be task completion time, admin time, management time, and people time. So each day, week, and month, we'll need a mix of all of these. So what are these? Well, you've got your task completion time. This is doing the stuff that you need to get done, like the tasks, these bigger ones. Admin time is maybe doing a bit of paperwork, doing those sorts of little tasks. I sometimes call them thankless tasks. The management time, that is making sure jobs are getting done, checking in with people, but you're checking in with the people to see how the tasks are getting completed. That's why it's management time. Whereas the people time, that is spending the one-to-one time with individuals. So obviously delegation, as we've talked about, is king here too. As if we can delegate some of our task completion or admin time to someone else, then we free up more time for our management and people time, which I'm going to call people time a bit of leadership time. One great strategy for prioritizing tasks, which I'm a big advocate for, is the Eisenhower matrix tool. Here you have 4 quadrants based on urgency and importance. If you use this as a weekly check-in, which you do maybe each Friday before you go home, for the next week, you can move, cross off, and add tasks to this grid. You will end up with some tasks in the important urgent quadrant, which you will have to do as soon as possible because they're really important and they're very urgent. Some tasks will be in the neither urgent nor important. Most of these can therefore be crossed off anyway, as if they're not important to anyone and they're not urgent, then are they actually worth doing? Are they going to make a difference? If they were going to make a difference, they wouldn't be in the not important. They would maybe be in the important section. However, one thing you must make time for is your people time, your leadership time. Too often this is put into the neither urgent nor important and therefore forgotten. But really, this is very important to check in with individuals, meet one-to-one with them, prioritize their growth and development and championing them. Investing in others is never not important. So for me, in my calendar, those regular one-to-one meetings are sacred and they come above everything else. The next question is, how do you handle conflict within your team, and what advice would you give to leaders facing interpersonal challenges amongst their team members? Well, I actually wrote a blog about a very similar issue pretty recently. Conflict, I think, can come in many guises, from the overt forms of conflict, which are very public and out there, to the more subtle undercurrents which can remain hidden, bubbling under the surface. So conflict needs to be addressed at the earliest possible moment. How to address it will obviously come down to some careful diplomacy. Firstly, let's say it was a public conflict, so people are very aware that it's happening. In the heat of that moment, the conflict needs to be addressed through calm and confident intervention. So the most obvious form of intervention would be separating individuals in the midst of conflict. For example, you might look to take one away for a coffee. So removing them from the space, which would help de-escalate the situation right there and right then. Next comes the leadership skill. So maybe you haven't actually had to separate people at this point. This is common for all types of conflict. Each party in any form of conflict will feel aggrieved, and each is valid in their aggrievance, and we need to accept that at that point in time. How individuals feel is always valid. However, each needs to be shown and made aware of the other party, because more often than not, when you're in conflict, you start looking inwards and you feel attacked, so therefore it's all about self-preservation. So here we need a careful form of diplomacy, keeping the individuals in the conflict at the forefront of what we're about to do. So first, I would say look to have a one-to-one with one of the individuals. Doesn't matter which one at this point. We need to understand their experience of what happened, and through this, their wants and their needs. So as a leader, wants and needs of individuals are always key to make sure that we're aware of. So you are looking to understand the wants and needs that that individual has of both you as the leader and of the situation. And that includes what they want and need from the other party. So this should be done very carefully, but you need to make sure that you create that safe space where you are looking to understand the situation from their sides. We, as a leader, need to not be seen as taking sides, and therefore we should not be looking to agree with what has been said. Instead, we need to show that we understand their thoughts and feelings, and we need to make sure that they're aware that they are valid, and we see them as being valid. We need to pick our language here very carefully. Now that can be quite hard in the moment, but we need to avoid personalizing this and trying to become a fixer. That can be a very dangerous situation if we're coming in and trying to be a fixer, trying to fix everything at that moment in time. Instead, we should be looking to show an understanding. So, for example, a simple, I understand why you feel this way. That validates their experience, rather than agreeing. So, compare that to, I agree, that would annoy me too. What you would have done by saying that is put yourself into it, and you've almost put yourself on their side, so they're going to leave that meeting, if you were to say that, thinking that you're on their side, and therefore you think the other person is in the wrong. You need to remain in the middle, and therefore not putting yourself on the side and not making one person feel like you are agreeing that the other person is wrong. Now, as a leader, we need to, at this point, open up the picture. So we would need to explore and share the bigger picture with that individual in that meeting. So we would need to explain at that point how the conflict may have impacted the wider team, the knock-on effect it may have, and we would need to make them aware of what would help the team move forward. By doing this, it's very careful, but by doing this, we are taking their focus from inwards to outwards. We are making them see the bigger picture. And we're explaining how resolving the conflict would benefit the team as well as them individually. So this is you sharing your understanding of the bigger picture and how resolving the conflict would lead to better outcomes for all. Then we would need to look to find a compromise. What would you need to be able to resolve this conflict and for you to move forwards? So here what we're trying to do is use the forward-facing direction that we have just established by explaining how moving forwards would benefit the team. So we're trying to use that direction and encourage them to move in this direction themselves. We would then close the meeting with a clear action point of, so I'm going to have a similar conversation with so-and-so. If we're able to find a middle ground here, would you be willing to have a discussion together with me facilitating that? What we've done is we've asked permission to progress this. They're going to leave that meeting feeling like you are going to help try and resolve this. So therefore, they're not going to try and go and do it themselves. They're not going to try and seek them out. They know that you are doing something about it. Now, we would then need to have a similar conversation with the other party. So in essence, what we're trying to do is encourage both parties to come towards a middle ground. We're taking them away from their polarized positions and we're trying to bring them closer to the middle by sharing what our understanding of the bigger picture is, our understanding of the conflict is, and trying to think about what each of them needs from each other. And when we get them to this middle point, what we're in essence doing is we're preparing them to come to a resolution. By moving them closer to that central space, we are now in a place to be able to facilitate a mediation meeting where we can bring together both individuals and together we can share that middle ground, which we've worked hard to find, and explore the steps which each person, including you, would need to do in order to move this forwards. So again, by being a leader, we're taking a part of the ownership about the conflict as well. Take on board some action points, some things that we are going to do, because we're going to demonstrate and show that if we're willing to take action points on, they should as well. It's important here that no individual in that meeting feels favoured, that both individuals have action points to move forwards as well, and that the agreed middle is beneficial for everyone, which includes the wider team. And remember, you're there as an advocate for the wider team. You're there as the leader of the wider team, so therefore you're taking away action points and you're taking away the benefit for the wider team. An important part of every meeting, whether it's one-to-one, a team meeting, but especially a mediation meeting like this, is that there are check-ins at the end, where each of the individuals shares what they are taking away from the meeting, what their most important takeaway is, and what their actions are, and whether there is anything else that they need from the meeting and from you in order to be able to achieve their intended outcome, the outcome that they wanted when they came in. So hopefully at this point, they've come into the mediation meeting looking for it to be resolved. So what else do they need to make sure that this is resolved for them? And therefore, when they leave that door, it's resolved, it's done. The next question here is, how do you maintain transparency and open communication with your team, especially during challenging times or transitions? Honesty. It's as simple as that. One of the most important currencies of leadership, as well as time, is trust. Trust, for me, is bestowed upon the team from a leader without question, and can only ever be lost. Whilst the leader must approach the relationship from a stance of having to always earn trust. As such, hiding any information which is necessary would erode any earned trust, and that can sabotage the relationship, and this can become almost an impossible position as a leader to regain. Therefore, honest communication for me is key. When times get challenging, hard, or in moments of change, the avenues and frequency of communication must always increase. First and foremost, for me, is putting others first. Remember, leadership is an act of service and not an act of getting others to do work as effectively and efficiently as possible. As such, we must always consider the thoughts, feelings, and motivation of others. In my opinion, we as a leader have the ability to hugely negatively impact each of these, but only subtly positively impact each of these. So in my opinion, we are more capable of destructive impacts than constructive ones. As such, we must carefully consider the result of any act of leadership. If I take the two instances separately, so challenging times and then transitions, I can share my approach in both of these instances. So the first instance, which is the challenging time. I learnt this approach from reflecting on how I acted during the first lockdown from the pandemic as a team leader compared to how I saw other leaders react. So I was definitely not a strong leader, and I was not effective at this instance. Our initial reaction as a person during a challenging time is to recoil. It's the natural response of fight, flight, or even fold. As individuals, we have this response, and we can become consumed by ourselves and on how this will impact on us. And in all honesty, this is how I initially reacted, and I stayed in this space for too long. I was very much focused on myself, and I was very much focused on how do I get through this. So I was still in that fight, flight, or fold, that high anxiety space. As a leader, what we need to do is need to realize that we have others who are looking for us for guidance in these times. They're looking for us for support and for comfort. The members of our team are also going to be having a very similar reaction. They are going to be in the midst of deciding whether they're going to run away, to stick it out and to fight, or to bury their heads in the sand and deny it's happening. Therefore, the best example of strong leadership in these times, and something I have learnt a lot from, actually came from a leader who during the pandemic not only increased her frequency of communication, we were receiving updates almost daily to start off with. And these were not just quick little messages, but long and detailed emails outlining what we are going to be doing and how what we were going to be doing was going to positively impact on others and ensure we kept moving in the direction towards our common goals. In essence, she was reaffirming our common values and gave us a purpose. This approach is reassuring, and it was so clear and open. And in a time of challenge, that familiarity is vital to moving forwards, together and in a coherent way. So during this time, what I feel is important is to communicate more, include more detail in that communication, reaffirm shared values, and how we can continue to achieve the overall mission. We need to be making sure that we're focusing on others and not just how we ourselves are reacting to that time and that crisis that we're currently going through. In terms of transitions, which let's call them periods of change, firstly, we need to appreciate that everyone's initial response to news of change is again going to be recoil. And the model which I use here, in order to understand how to lead, is the grief curve. The reaction to change is very much the same as the period of grief. Something which has been in place or present for a while now is going away and will no longer be there. There will naturally be an element of attachment, whether that's good or bad, to whatever it is that's changing. And the level of attachment is different for everyone, but everyone will have some. Therefore, we need to appreciate as the leader that there will be key stages for everyone. The first being shock. I can't believe we are having to do this. The second one will be denial. The change isn't going to happen. We just need to wait it out and keep doing X, Y, Z, and it will just blow over. Awareness. They will become aware that things are changing, but this could lead to them questioning why they can't just keep doing what it is that they were doing that was working for them before. Then acceptance. The feeling of absence of what it is that we used to do. The realization that that's not coming back, and that they will not just go back to that default reaction that they were used to, and that can be quite upsetting for them, but they are ready to now let go, to fill that void with something new. The next stage being experimentation. They're going to have renewed energy, and they're going to be willing to throw themselves into trying these new things in order to try and fill that void that they've just identified. And then the last one is going to be integration, which is the new way that they've been exploring is now the new norm, and they own it. It's now theirs. This new approach is what they do. It's now part of how they do things. They're almost proud of this. So we've got those stages: the shock, the denial, the awareness, the acceptance, the experimentation, and then the integration. And everyone goes through those. Now, how do we lead through this curve? If we're now aware of this, how do we lead? Well, knowing that each individual will go through this curve at their own pace, and that nothing we can do will make them go through it any faster is key. Instead, we just make it easier and facilitate their transition. This comes into the idea of early adapters, late adapters, and defiant disruptors. So some of the team will have gone through that whole cycle during the first meeting where you've shared that change. You've cast that vision, you've shared the approach, and most importantly, you've explained why it is that we are doing it. And that has allowed those early adopters to get on board and to throw their energy into implementing the change. So they're very much on the experimentation bit already. They went through that whole beginning part of that curve while you were talking. The defiant disruptors, well, they're going to remain in the denial stage for a very long time. And there's nothing we or anyone else can do to change that. They may well never come out of that stage. Instead, they may need to move on to something which resonates with them more. And you know what? That's okay. Situations change and people no longer align with the new direction that you have put in place, but somewhere else would be better suited for them. So as a leader, it's our responsibility for them, their growth and their development, to ensure that everyone's in the right place for them. So maybe transitioning them out of the team and somewhere else is actually the right thing to do. So the people in the middle, for me, as we're seeing through that change, the style and frequency of communication is key to establishing more adopters. So the first thing to do is champion the early adopters, ensuring those who will adopt eventually spend time with these early adopters. and we reward them with their form of recognition. And that's key. We facilitate their transition and ensure the environment is conducive and resourced in order to make the change as easy as possible. So we put them alongside the early adopters who are already there in the experimentation phase. We have given them everything they need to be able to experiment. We've given them time, we've given them the environment to both try and potentially fail. So we facilitated their transition and ensured that the environment is conducive and resourced in order to make the change as easy as possible, and we have our regular one-to-one catch-ups and team meetings, and they are also key in those team meetings. Here, what we're going to do is we are reaffirming the vision and how the change that we're putting in place fits within that shared vision and the overall mission. So the final few questions are actually some scenarios which were posed. So I've got a couple of quick-fire scenarios, and then there is one which is actually a bigger scenario, which I'm going to give some answers to of how I would approach each situation. So the first scenario is a team member consistently misses deadlines, affecting the entire team's performance. How would you address this situation as a leader? So this is an interesting one, and I'm sure it happens more often than we would like to admit. So here, I would look to have a one-to-one meeting with them as soon as possible. For me, the first port of call in any situation like this is to understand the context surrounding it. So there will always be an underlying reason to anything like this. So I would call them to a meeting and ask them if there was anything going on which is impacting their work. I would make sure that they know this is a safe space, and then ask them if there's anything they need from me to make it easier for them to be able to do their work. As long as there is a culture of safety and the team know that we will accommodate any external stresses in the knowledge that it's not going to last forever, that there will be a level of understanding should they need to have a lower workload due to maybe a divorce, maybe they're struggling with some mental health problems or other external factors. So any disclosure that they make within this meeting, we would then discuss, just in case maybe we might want to disclose something with the team. But again, that has to be agreed with them first and foremost. And we might just agree that we're actually just going to say to the team that so-and-so is doing their best right now. For them as a team, we just might need to be mindful that over the next couple of weeks, they may need a little bit more of a careful hand, some careful consideration. However, they will be back at it soon. So for me, in this situation, it comes down to that one-to-one meeting and understanding the context. Particularly if they've been a high achiever, high performer before, the fact that they're no longer that, there is something going on. And it might be the conversation where you have, is there anything you need from me? Maybe it's a fact that they don't understand something, they need a little bit more clarity, maybe they need some training. But by having that one-to-one meeting, we're able to identify what it is, and we've asked them. We haven't accused. We stay clear of any accusational language. We don't call them into the meeting and say, I've noticed you've not been performing very well. Straight away, you've put them on the back foot. They're in fight or flight mode. They're going to panic. Self-preservation kicks in. There's no way they're going to be honest. There's no way they're going to see you and trust you and want to work for you. They feel attacked. Not great. So straight off the bat, we're asking them, what's going on? What's happening? How can I help you? Supporting, not accusing. The second scenario is a team member is consistently delivering quality work, but they lack engagement during team meetings. How would you approach this situation to boost their participation and morale? Well, for me, this one's simple. The answer here is the fact that they are not being challenged enough. So I would again have a one-to-one meeting where I will recognise their achievements and ask them what their ambitions are and if they're open to some more challenging work. We can then explore how some of the projects that we maybe have could fit into their growth plan. I would not point out to them that their lack of engagement. Again, that's accusational and we want to steer clear of that. So instead, I would look to engage them with empowerment and ownership. I give them something they have ownership over and I empower them to make decisions. And I need to be clear at this point to what level they have autonomy. So I'm making sure that they know the level of their empowerment. What is in their remit? What do they need to then check in with me? Then, as they work through these projects that maybe we've assigned to them, they may be given some leadership responsibilities of others. And within team meetings, they may need to have some agenda points which will keep them focused and engaged within these team meetings. If there are more than one disengaged member, though, in meetings, I need to at that point first look and reflect on the meeting itself. So how I'm running them, my part that I play in that, what purpose the meetings are, and whether they're serving each individual in that meeting well enough. Do they all need to be there at the same time? Or should I consider maybe splitting that meeting into several smaller meetings with different groups and only inviting those that the meeting's relevant for? So again, is it a bigger problem, which is therefore me? Or if it's an individual one-to-one meeting, can we look to engage them? And that's through asking questions. Notice again, I've asked questions about what it is that they want to be able to do in the future, whether some projects can fit into their growth plan. What is it that they're looking to do? Are they open to this new challenging work? The third scenario is your team is experiencing low morale due to a recent project failure. What steps would you take to rebuild morale and confidence? So first and foremost, any team failure is owned by me. Success is owned by them. So I give them the success, I take the failure. So the first thing I would have done at this point in time is to have brought the team together and taken ownership publicly of the failure. I would have opened the space up for them to publicly or privately share with me what they needed from me to have succeeded with the project. So this could have been what they needed more of from me or less of from me. And then secondly, I would have pointed out the successes within the project, as there's always going to be some. So I would have broken it down, and these would be things that went really well that I would have noticed. So these are things that would have worked really well, or even the fact that maybe we experimented and tried new things, so having the bravery to try new things. And I would also reframe any failure as a learning opportunity, and that's key. A time to reflect on it and take away what worked and what didn't work so well. That's what that meeting is. And we always need to make sure that we set that culture where failure is a platform to build. I call this failing forwards. And when this is done regularly, this becomes a part of the culture that we have within the organization, and we become more agile and creative. There's no fear in trying, as there's no negative failures that we have. Now, the final and slightly bigger scenario here is your organization is going through a major restructuring due to market changes, which includes merging two teams with different cultures and ways of working. Additionally, there are rumors of potential layoffs, causing anxiety amongst employees. As a leader, you've been tasked with integrating these teams smoothly, maintaining morale, and addressing concerns about job security. How would you navigate this complex situation to ensure a successful integration and keep your team motivated during this uncertain period? Wow, this is a big one. And it does happen. It happens quite a lot, where maybe you have an organization buying out and taking over another one. They therefore bring two teams together. It might just be restructuring. So it does happen a lot. So firstly, I'm just going to point out this culture element. So different culture. For me, culture is the way we think, act, and interact. So it starts with how we, as the leader, are thinking, how we're acting to everyone within the team and this new team that's coming in, and how we're interacting with them. And that is going to be an infectious thing with others. Okay, if we're the leader and we are setting an example, that hopefully should address the culture. So we need to embody the culture. We need to be very visible. We need to be very present, and we need to show the culture that we are trying to get. So as long as we're there in and amongst the team a lot, we can make sure that that's in place. If we are out and away from it and always in meetings, then the culture is going to take care of itself. So you either have an emergent culture or an intentional culture. You need to make sure that you are ahead of this, and you therefore are the one leading the culture. Then the next part is going to start off for me with a difficult conversation. And the only way to have this is to be brutally honest and basically rip the band-aid off. As much as bad news is hard to take for people, in the long run, they will appreciate the honesty more than the uncertainty. So I would get them together. I would be very honest about the situation. I would say that we're coming together. And yes, if there were jobs that were going to be at risk, I would be honest with that. And I would definitely at this point say that I don't know whose job is safe or whose job is not. And all we can do is come together as a team and just work through this together. I would then also make sure that I reiterate that my door is always open, that they could therefore come and they can speak to me if they ever need to talk to me, if they ever need some more clarity, if there's anything I can do to help them. So as part of this, I would also make sure that this is part of this trust building and maintaining phase. That's going to happen throughout the entirety of the next period. There's going to have to be trust building because there's going to be an element of trust being lost because of what's happening in your organization. You as the leader, however, are there to build trust with you. Okay? And we're trying to maintain trust with those that have already been within our team. So how do we make sure that we have this? It's a common theme throughout what I've put within this podcast, but it's regular communication. I've previously mentioned this. We've said around challenging times and transitions, regular communication is key. So part of this is therefore going to be one-to-one catch-ups. So again, you can intentionally go out to individuals and organize one-to-one catch-ups. You can have that open door policy where they can come in and have that one-to-one catch-up on their terms. So within this, communication is all about reassuring and telling them that you are going to tell them and make sure everyone's aware as soon as you are aware. And that would be definitely around the result of any layoffs. And my personal belief is that layoffs should always be the last port of call for any organization. However, not many of us are going to be in a position where we're able to make the decision as to whether we are laying off staff or not. That may be made much higher up and it may be out of our hands because of financial pressures. So layoffs often happen because organizations grow beyond what it is they're doing in terms of current performance, and therefore they then have to scale back. Or maybe new technology comes in place, in which case I personally think we should be looking to retrain and reposition staff. But if layoffs are necessary, it is all about getting ahead of that curve, having that communication, reassuring them that you would let them know as soon as you find out, and following through on that. So if you are aware of layoffs, I personally don't believe in sitting on that piece of information, because the moment that is found out, everyone who is left over, if you have then laid off those staff, if the people left behind find out that you knew about the layoffs before and you didn't tell people, even though you said you were going to, you've lost trust. And that is a very difficult, like I said before, very difficult position to come back from. Now, honest and understanding communication is key. We need to ensure that we are doing it in the right way. We need also to make sure that we are resourcing the team as best we can in that period of transition and providing clear milestones and targets, something to work towards. We are trying to create an environment for them to succeed in whatever period of time that we have before that transition is finished. Now, by integrating the two teams together, we also have to be aware that half of that team is not going to know us at all. And we haven't worked with them. So while some of the team members will know about us, they will not. So we will therefore be inhabiting two different types of leadership within the same group. So we may be in a position with some of the group where our leadership is based around who we are, what we can do for them, because of the fact we've worked with them before and they know us. while these new members of the team, we exhibit with them positional leadership. They are literally only following us at that moment in time because of the fact that we have a badge, we have a name on it, and because of the position that we hold. We need to look at building that relationship here with those new members of staff. I've already said it, but we also need to have that open door policy here. This is definitely the time for that. Our time must be devoted in this period to the team. When they need to speak to us, we need to be there to reassure and listen to them. We also need to be looking to involve them in some of the decision making, so maybe we are inviting them to come into the door if they disagree with a decision and therefore discussing it. Obviously, you have the last port of call, you have the decision making, but involving them will make them feel like they have some form of control. But we also need to be honest. We need to share that we do not know what is happening in terms of jobs, but the only thing we can do at this time is to work as best we can and be as successful as a team as possible. We need to refocus that energy on the outcome, on the work, on meeting the challenge. The more successful and effective we can be as a team, the better the outcome will be for as many people as possible. Let them know that we are on their side. However, as a leader, we also need to make sure that we are advocating for the organisation and the organisational wants and needs as well as our team. The closer we can bring the two together, the better the outcome we can achieve. Therefore, as well as communicating down, we also need to be reaching out and communicating more with those in more senior positions, those decision makers. If we can relay how we are working towards their wants and needs and how the team is performing, we may be able to achieve a better outcome here for all, and we would also be able to keep more people in the loop because we will have more information because those communication pathways are open and regularly used. Upwards leadership here is just as vital as downwards leadership. The other key pillar that I think here as well to keep in mind as the last part is well-being. We are going to be in a really big turmoil and there is an unknown, and there is always going to be an unknown until we know during this transition. So we need to make sure that we're leading the whole person for every member of our team. So the fact that we have two teams come together, we might want to, at this point, consider team building activities. These could be as small as lunching together, having a coffee break together, or as big as external activities, organising some outings, some group events, or even just evening events. So that's my thought on that particular situation. Obviously, there's a lot more that we could literally spend an entire podcast going through that exact situation, but I've given you my thoughts that came first to my head the moment I saw that question. And for the final part, I'm actually going to do this myself because I usually do this when I interview guests on my podcast. And I usually ask the question, and I've actually been asked this question as well. So it's quite a nice little one that it fits with my closing. And that is, what advice would you give to emerging leaders or those aspiring to take on leadership roles in their careers? So obviously we've got some listeners out there that are not quite in a leadership position, but are thinking about it in the future. So what are my pieces of advice? I've actually got 3, and I'm going to take liberties here, but I've got 3. My first piece of advice is the name of my podcast. To lead is to learn. Now, we cannot lead if we are not open to learning. That might be learning new approaches and new ideas, as well as learning more about ourselves and about others. So we should be looking to ask more questions and creating a space where we listen. Especially when you are new in a role, we should spend more time listening and learning than directing and doing. My second piece of advice is to lead yourself before you ever try leading others. I really did not do this well enough when I first started out. I spent those first 5 years just leading myself. So I would advise you to make sure to spend some time each day working on reflecting and your self-awareness. When we know ourselves better and we know how we show up and why we show up the way we do, especially with others, we therefore will be able to know how we can lead better and how we impact on others. It's very true. The better we understand ourselves, the better we understand others. So as much as I said leadership should be self-focused, it should still start with yourself, because understanding yourself allows us to understand others. And my third and final piece of advice, which I'm going to give this time, is time. Time is the most important resource which we as a leader have, and that is ours as well as that of others. We need to think about how we are using it, where we are spending it, how we are spending it, and how we are utilizing it. Now, they are all slightly different things. Now, we have the ability to influence how others experience time. Is their time, for example, being spent very quickly or slowly? Is their time being spent focusing on tasks, or are we giving them time to spend on themselves and their creativity? So the rate at which their time is being spent is key here, because they will experience time going very quickly if they're doing lots of tasks. However, if they are focusing on themselves and their creativity and they're being given that space in order to get creative, that time goes a bit slower and they're able to therefore fulfill their creativity needs. We also have the power to move through time at whatever rate we set. And that's key. The way that we and others experience time is set by us. So, for example, we could spend time quickly getting things done, moving from one thing to another. We could be setting this rate at which time is being spent by, for example, speaking really quickly. But equally, we could be speaking slower and calmer. And when we do, that slows down the way that people experience time. So, as a leader, the way we communicate is key to how time is being experienced by others as well as ourselves. We could also be allocating tasks and ensuring that their time is spent focused on tasks, but we could also encourage time to be spent focused on them as individuals and their growth and their development. So we could be therefore setting their work, or we could be creating the space for them to then go away and learn something new. So we as a leader will be in complete control of that. So it's quite a big exploration there of time. And again, I could probably do a whole podcast on this, but for me, as a leader, the control over time that we have is a superpower. And what we need to be is more aware of how we are allocating and setting the tone for the time budget of everyone in our realm of influence. To what extent is it that the quality of their time budget is being spent and how it's being used? To what extent are we not utilizing it effectively? So it really is thinking about the type of task. Are we task or people focused in a sense? Or are we fast or slow in terms of time? So this kind of comes a little bit from the DISC model of leadership. And if you want to go away and look at that a little bit more, it's huge. It's very powerful. It's not the be all and end all. It's not the big solution, but it definitely does. When you understand it better, it definitely does underpin everything that you do in terms of the communication and the way it is that you communicate with people and the space that your leadership and communication takes individuals into. Are they going to be fast task focused? Are they therefore zap, high anxiety? You've set them into motion. They are very much up there and you might need to then bring them back. Or are you slow and people focused? Are you in a one-to-one meeting with them and are you talking about them and their personal growth and what it is that they want to get out of their careers? You as the leader, because you are in the position of influence, have the ability to take the individual wherever you want to take them. And therefore, I'm going to rip this off from Spider-Man, but with great power comes great responsibility. So because you have the power over time, you have a huge responsibility there. So that's my last piece of advice. And thank you for your questions. And if there is any more, then feel free to send them to me. I will then accumulate them together again like I did with this. And I will do another podcast where I answer any more of your questions. I really did enjoy the scenarios, so keep them coming in because I would love to explore them a little bit further. I might even make some podcast episodes where I just focus in on one of those scenarios.
And until next time, remember, to lead requires us to continuously